All right. Welcome everybody to this presentation, Logz.io, our timeless and data optimizer features. So I'd just like to familiarize everybody with the methods of contact to get a hold of us. If you have any questions following the session, you can always chat with us inside of the application if you're already a Logz.io customer. We have direct 24/7 chat support. You can email us at help@logz.io. You're going to want to remember that. We're going to have a little contest. Or you can do self-support as a customer at support.logz.io. As I mentioned, we're doing this little timeless challenge. We like to do these with our webinars. In exchange for your participation, you can get a pretty awesome Logz.io branded t-shirt or other swag. And today's is very simple. Doesn't really require much homework. Simply share your timeless use case, either something that you're already doing or based on what you learned today, a new idea you have for the future. Interesting use cases win. Can be multiple winners. Just submit yours to help@logz.io. This information will also be put into our academy, so there is a self-service training resource. If you want to share this with someone later, come back to it and learn from it. You'll find this webinar and a lot of the other past material we've done at academy.logz.io. I'm Matt Colmoni. I work here as a senior solution architect, and that means that I help people solve technical problems with Logz.io and understand the value that they can get out of the product. We're going to go through 3 distinct subjects today. First, timeless storage. So where you can put this data that we're talking about. 2, data optimizer, how you get the data there. And 3, building charts with that data. So how do you make use of it once you've gotten it there? Let's start with timeless storage. It's a tool for metric storage with unlimited duration. Why is unlimited duration important? So let me give you an example. So we were approached just about a month ago by an existing IT security customer. And they were being asked by management to put together a dashboard that could be used for high-level business discussions internally. In order to justify additions to the product, changes, new strategies, they needed to bring up information from across multiple teams. And they needed to bring up this information for a large period of time, trending over 6 months, 9 months. The reality is that they don't have 6 or 9 months of storage with us. They have the ability to store things to S3 archives and bring them back in later, but they wanted this to be something that any PM could go to at a moment's notice and bring up this historical trend and understand what plans should they be making and what is the impact of the new things they're doing on these trends. So they needed to aggregate the data across multiple sources for long periods of time, share this company-wide, and not be limited by the cost-effective, shorter retention of searchable data that they currently have. And that's where Timeless came in. Once they described this use case to me, I was immediately like, this is exactly what this feature does. We implemented it to take the important metrics that they wanted charted, push them into a Timeless account, create visualizations that were then safely shared with the entire org. And now, as they're aggregating data in there over time, they're going to be able to go back to that for a year, maybe 2 years, depending upon how much it fills up, and create really long-term charts. So in the time picker dropdown of Kibana, there's the oft-neglected 90 or 180-day time period. This is the thing that lets you finally use it. And it took fairly little effort. So what is Timeless? For anyone who's not familiar, in the account management part of your tool, you'll be able to find this down below your existing accounts. It is another type of account with just a different perspective. So fixed storage volume, so 10, 50, 100 gig, however much you have, doesn't change, with unlimited retention. So as long as you can fit data inside of that storage volume, it will stay there. You can set very specific access controls on which accounts or sub-accounts can read or write to this, which is great because then you can have a lot of control over users of it. And then you have functions for cleaning the data out of it that aren't normally there in the other types of accounts, so that you can delete a specific time range of data or a specific source of data. So this is great control, and you can be very careful with what's in the account. Now, what are the main reasons that you use Timeless? We already talked about one. That customer who succeeded doing trending analysis. They wanted more than their typical log retention. They wanted to see logs over a large period of time. Faster dashboards, how do we make things render quicker? Safe data access, how do we take sensitive data and make it something that's safe for a broad organization to see? And compliance storage, how can we store things that are hot accessible for long periods of time? These are all use cases for timeless. So trending analysis, long-term trending. Very few people access logs older than 30 days. It happens rarely. Over 90 days, almost never. And the costs for storing things for that period of time are extremely high. So we created S3 archiving in our system to accommodate this, where you can keep your data in that for as long as you want and restore it for compliance reasons. But some compliance requirements say that you have to have 90 days of hot data, or you want to create a chart that can display this information over a larger period of time. So that's what they're doing with Timeless. They're taking a subset of the data, aggregated metrics, and they're pushing it in there. One of our large enterprise customers does this with our own internal data. So they have our utilization statistics. They use this so heavily that they're doing long-term planning about their Logz.io interactions, and they're saying, hey, as we're growing, we're going to need to grow how much we use with logs. Let's get a trending view so we can understand what our data usage has been on a daily basis over the last year. Historical comparison is also enabled by this. So a common thing we get asked, how can I see, save 13 months of data? And I ask, well, why do you want to save 13 months of data? Well, I want to compare seasonal data, last Black Friday to this Black Friday. Great. So you could use the S3 archiving and then pull back a prior month. But if you do this in timeless storage, you'll be able to compare those two date ranges or see the entire year's worth of data. So it can be a more effective storage solution for that goal. Faster dashboards. So we have one large enterprise customer with a pretty hefty daily shipping volume, 300 gigs of daily data shipped in, and once a week on Mondays, they, based on the type of business they're in, need to run some very extensive reporting. So they bring up dashboard after dashboard, which contain multiple visualizations spanning lots of different data sources. So there's all different types of data types in there, and they're visualizing a week's worth of data at a time. And it is not very fast. So it takes a while to load, it's not as responsive as it could be, and there limits their ability to, slice and dice through that data, dive through it the way that we want them to be able to. We've been engaging in a project with them to convert them over to using Timeless, because Timeless is just an aggregation of that data. It's actually quite a bit less under the covers, and it loads super fast. So as we update these dashboards to the new data source, every Monday that they load these things, it becomes much more responsive, and they get a lot more done. Safe data access. So I mentioned this a couple of times, and one of our customers was nice enough to let us present their use case. So we worked with Quest, and our customer Sean Marshall came to us with a requirement. He works as a DevOps engineer, and they are primarily observing security data. They're loading security data into their accounts. Their by needs are limits on who can see that security data. There's a lot of sensitive things in it. So there's a limited team that can observe it, but they wanted to share to the broader DevOps teams visualizations of the metrics of how healthy things are. So you have sensitive data that's captured, and you have to restrict who can see it. You want to share it with everybody on the team, so what do? Using timeless storage, we're loading in aggregations of the monitored data. So we get metrics about the number of 200 successes versus 500 failures, but we don't get the details of the logs underneath. So the data has been sanitized and now can be controlled in terms of who's seeing it and push it to a broader audience. So we did this, captured the data we needed in Timeless, built dashboards based on it, and now you have these same monitoring dashboards that only a very few could see before, safely shared to the broader team without exposing sensitive data. And the DevOps, goal is to, allow as many engineers and other, people related to these applications visibility into the health of things and to be responsible for maintaining them. You need to be able to provide them with data, and this is a great way of doing it. So, trending analysis, being able to build visualizations over long periods of time, faster dashboards, avoiding that Monday morning blues situation that our one customer had by making things quicker with Timeless, safe data access, allowing an entire organization to view things that they otherwise couldn't, And then lastly, compliance storage. So you can store full logs for that unlimited duration. So this can be very helpful for PCI compliance or something similar. All right, second item on the agenda, the data optimizers. So we're talking about timeless storage. How do we get the data into timeless storage? Data optimizers, scheduled queries that are going to aggregate the data and push it in there. First step in using a data optimizer is what you're doing every day in Kibana, searching through your data. Use the existing Kibana searches you have, use our advanced analytics with insights, find the important data that you need. Then create a timeless account and give it access to that data source, the source account in which you're running your searches. And then create a data optimizer, an automation that will go in, target your selected fields, create the aggregations you want, and you'll end up with data in your timeless account. There's a couple of parts to this. If you've ever built a search or an alert inside of Logz.io, you know how to build a data optimizer. The same process. You build a query based on Kibana queries or filters. You set a frequency with which this data will be activated. So maybe every 10 minutes, you're going to create an aggregation of your logs. You're going to target where this data gets stored, one of your timeless accounts, and you're going to choose what the output is. So we go from having a very full log to having a subset of the data, and we're going to show how that works. So your input. Query through, find a particular set of data. In this case, I'm looking at metric data coming from my own laptop. So I shipped it with metric beat, and I want to make sure that metric set module exists. So within that metric beat set, I don't want every single log. I just want the ones that contain this. I end up with a result set back, a whole bunch of different logs, which contain a lot of information. All of this information and then some is existing in these logs. So my search is in place. That's the input. And I build the optimizer. Based on this search, I'm going to target where this data is going to go into my timeless account. I'm going to set up that trigger, how frequently we're going to aggregate this data, once every 10 minutes. And I'm going to build my aggregation on a value. So in this case, I did my max CPU cores. So as opposed to having, in that time period, a couple of thousand logs that all said, hey, guess what? You still have 8 cores in your laptop. I just do a max aggregation on that, and I get one log with one value. Much more efficient. Here's the example output log. So in that time period it ran, it triggered, it captured the number of cores I had, it created one log entry every 10 minutes that says 8. That was the max in that 10-minute time period. Fraction of the total size originally. So what do you do with this information once you have it in there? You create visualizations out of it. So we're going to go and do this live and play with this in the application a little bit. But first, I just want to go through some key tips. If any of you are planning on playing with this or have tried it in the past, these are a couple of things you're going to want to know to make it work. So when you're building a visualization in Kibana, it needs to be able to see what fields are available. So it auto-completes, right? You say, I want to split something on a term, it needs to see it. So in order to make that accessible, now that the data is in timeless, just build a saved search. So build a search, add your timeless account, in this case mat test, to your selected accounts, filter to a type that is the timeless account's name. So all of the logs that are put into your timeless account will have the account name as the type. Easy to filter to them. Then save that search. So now we're selecting things in that account with that type. It will be available to you in Kibana when you start trying to build. When you start a dashboard, a new visualization, just remember that. You've built a saved search. This is going to help you. Don't use the default customer index. Use the timeless data source that you've created. If you're converting an existing visualization, as we did for Quest, we needed to see how those visualizations were built in the first place. So just pay attention. If you're opening up an existing one, look at if there's any saved search. Open up that saved search. It'll help you identify what fields it is you should be putting through the optimizer in the first place. Refresh your mappings. Once you've created your optimizers, they're creating new logs that have new fields in them. In order for those fields to be used inside of a new visualization, they have to be indexed. So you're going to want to refresh the Kibana mapping so that this information is available to you. Otherwise, you'll be like, why can't I find this field? Why is it not rendering? And finally, how you do your y-axis aggregation inside of the chart. So normally, let's say I'm just looking at logs over time. Y-axis will be set to count. It just counts the number of events that have come in. If I want to know how many 500 errors there are, well, I count up how many log events came in that had 500 in them. Great. It's different with timeless. We no longer have the 1,000 events that came in with 500s. We have one event in a 10-minute time period that counted the number of 500s. So you're going to want to sum the count field as opposed to counting log entries. I'm going to give you a nice visual example of that in a minute if that didn't make too much sense. All right, let's switch to looking at the application itself and go through this. So, querying the existing data. Here's my data source here. I'm in my account time after time. I'm not looking at my timeless account yet. I'm just looking at this account that's bringing in my metric beat information. So I'm filtering to things that are from metric beat, and I want to find a particular value. So I may have double the logs from metric beat. Some of them will be more system-oriented. Some will be more process-oriented. In this case, I'm filtering to just those that have some process-oriented information in them. And that gives me a result set of logs. So this is my source, right? Many, many entries, in this case, 100,000 hits in this time period that all contain this great set of data. I use this information to build some charts. So here's some visualizations about my system. Let's make this a little bit bigger. So what processes are running right now, and how many logs are they generating? Which ones are using the most CPU? What's my CPU total per usage percentage, and how many cores are in my system? So this is all being generated off the raw data. How can I get the same result, but get it for 90 days cheaply and make it render super fast? So I'm creating optimizers to take that original source of data I was looking at and put it into timeless so I can create those visualizations. So let's look at how we built one of these. I'm going to look at this metric set name one. Now you'll notice this looks a lot like an alert if you've been a user. And you'll notice that under alerts and events, optimizer definitions is in the same location. It's basically the same thing. Remember I said earlier, if you can build an alert, if you can build a search in our application, you can build an optimizer. It's really easy. So we have here what's their name and description of this optimizer. Great. We have the search that was saved from the prior page when we came in. So beats where metric name exists. And then we have the account that it's taking the data from, our source. Now we get into the optimizer specific options. Because this is set up as an optimizer, I have a group by option. And what I'm doing is I'm creating an aggregation of this data grouped by metric set name. Because for each name, that's a different process that's running for me. I want to count up how many times it's generating logs. I could create, for the dozen metric sets there are, 12 different optimizers. Specify each one and count it. But it's not super efficient. I don't want to spend that much time. If I use the group by option, you'll see down below the output is split by each value in that group. So I get all these different optimizer logs created, no extra effort. Group by is great. Where am I going to put the data? I'm going to put it into account mat test, that's my timeless account, and I'm triggering this to run once every 10 minutes. If you don't need that level of granularity, you could do it as much as like once every day. You could store this stuff for a very long time. It'll take up almost no space in your account. So I can see in that 10-minute time period, the most recent 10 minutes, it's giving me a preview of how many times each of these things executed, and I'm good to go. I'll save this off, and it'll start loading this data into my timeless account. When I say this data, I'm giving you an example of what these logs look like. So now instead of looking at my source account, I'm looking just at timeless. I can go into an example of one of these. We'll go in one that has metric set name, and these were loaded in earlier. We can see. So it's for metric set memory, count 60. So instead of 60 entries that all had memory as a metric set name, I've aggregated this up, pushed it into the system. Now I can build the same chart that I had before, but out of timeless data. So let's do that. Let's build one of those charts. So I'm just going to do a line chart because that's what my previous chart type looked like. Remember, save search. So this is what's going to make it auto-populate the field values when I'm going ahead and build this. Don't use the default customer index. So let's view this over time. So I'm going to set an x-axis. That is a date histogram. I want to view a little bit more than this, so let's go to 12 hours. Great, so this is my counted logs over time. Notice there's a big drop off here. My laptop got shut off. I have a long commute. 2 hours of data gone. I'm not happy about it either. Now I want to split this by the metric set name. So I'm going to add a sub-bucket and split this series. And I'm going to choose a term to split on. And this is where that save search helps us now. So when I'm looking for the field I want to split on, all these things from the timeless account are listed here. So I'll split on metric set name. There we go. But you notice it's just one flat line for all of these things. I have the top 5 different categories, but everyone is just counting as one. This is because the y-axis is doing the count of the number of timeless log entries. So this is what I was saying in that tips earlier. You need to change how this works from count to sum of the count value in the log. So that's where we're aggregating the count. We want to sum this up, and then you'll notice now this appears to be a real chart. I make a quick couple changes here in terms of how this looks. Change my y-axis to be scaled a little bit differently so that the things that are fairly small are a little bit more visible. And now let's save this. Great, so I have my chart saved off. What did this look like originally? So this was the original chart that was based on the raw data coming right from my system. Let's edit this and add in that new chart and compare. I'm just going to get this guy to load in, and I'll move it up to the top. On a trackpad, which is always risky. Perfect. So here's my new chart based on the timeless data. Here's my old chart based on the raw data. It's at slightly less fidelity, right? It's aggregating up information in 10-minute chunks. But over the long term, we're trending this. We can analyze it in the same way. So much cheaper in terms of space, super fast to load, safe because it's not exposing the backing information from the original logs, and just as effective as before. How much space does this all take up over time? So I'm looking at the logs that I'm generating here. Over the course of this 12 hours, 1,421 entries from timeless, 232 bytes average log size. And we're getting up to maybe by the end of the day, we'll have half a meg of total usage here. And the standard timeless account, the smallest increment that we allocate is 10 gigs. So you'll have a lot of space to be able to put these in and trend over a very long period of time. All right, let's go back. Now, just to sum up, we mentioned earlier the timeless challenge. If based on what you've seen today, again, anything that you're already doing using timeless, fantastic. Let us know about it. Any ideas that you have that you could do in the future, shoot them over to us. And if there's any sort of product enhancements that you're thinking of that would close the gap and make this something that you would use, let us know about that as well. Again, help at Logz.io. That's where you can send support requests and send these ideas. Try it out. If any part of this seems interesting to you, let your account manager know. You can start a free 2-week trial. It will be allocated a standard 10 gigabyte timeless storage account, or you can contact the support team and we'll get you put in touch with who you need to get this going as well. We can have this started in an hour for you, and then you can go forward with it. And also happy, as always, on the customer success side to provide the training that you may need or the support ongoing as you're trying this. And again, this will be uploaded to Logz.io Academy. So if later you're trying to build your own and you're remembering, hey, Matt told me about a couple of tricks that really make this thing usable, the content will be there for you to review again. So I'm going to go over if there's been any questions that have been asked during the course of this and answer them. Doesn't seem to be. It means one of two things. It was super comprehensible what I said today, or it was completely impenetrable and you couldn't even create questions out of it. So we'll hope it's the former. And thank you all for your time. Join us for webinars. We're holding them every month and maybe even more frequently upcoming. And we welcome any ideas of future webinars that you'd like to see sent to us as well. Have a great week.